My final project is on some of the major states that existed during Period 3, including the Mayans, Incas, Aztecs, the Byzantine Empire, the Swahili Coast city-states, and the Tang and Song dynasties. The Mayan civilization was heavily influenced by the culture and environmental adaptations that began with the Olmec civilization. The Mayans lived on the Yucatan Peninsula in modern-day Mexico and were able to successfully adapt to that environment. They used terrace farming and collected and stored water because the rain was unpredictable. The Mayan government was not centralized, instead consisting of dozens of city-states with some military alliances and rivalries between them. Though their system may seem disorganized, it allowed them to survive from 250 CE until around 900 CE, when some cities collapsed. The civilization continued and activity shifted to the north, where the Mayans continued to exist until they were conquered by the Spanish. The Incan Empire was one of the most prosperous civilizations in the Americas before the arrival of the Europeans. The Incas existed in the Andes Mountains from about 1200 to 1500 CE, but before being conquered by Spanish conquistadors as well. However, during their period of prosperity, they were able to become an organized, centralized empire with a far cultural reach. The Incas had a centralized government and military, and they regulated trade and the construction of roads. Once they had taken over people of surrounding villages and small civilizations, they forced Incan language, religion, and culture onto the conquered. This political and military success was made possible through their use of terrace farming on the Andes, where they grew high-calorie foods. If they had not been conquered by the Spanish, the Incas could have thrived for many years. The Aztec Empire spanned across modern-day Mexico, and their capital was Tenochtitlan. The water of Lake Texcoco and Tenochtitlan and the Aztecs' ability to adapt to the environment allowed their agriculture to thrive. At Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs built little square islands of dirt called chinampas to be able to plant on the lake with constant water getting to the plants. Also, the Aztecs were able to defeat surrounding peoples and villages, which they demanded tribute from, including jewelry, food, and animals. Lastly, the Aztecs were well known for their unorthodox religion, which included human sacrifices. They based lots of their culture on this religion as well. The Aztecs were a prosperous state for hundreds of years, and they would have continued had it not been for European diseases and armies. Feudalism was becoming a popular system for places with decentralized governments, specifically in Japan and Western Europe during Period 3. After the fall of the Roman Empire at the end of the 5th century, there was scrambling for power and no political unification. Aggressive Vikings and Magyars looked to take over villagers, so people looked to wealthy landowners for protection in exchange for labor and food. In Europe, people looked to knights for protection, and in Japan they looked to samurai. In general, people and their connections were all local. The feudal system was able to maintain stability for hundreds of years in both Japan and Western Europe, but declined once the laborers became too oppressed. The Byzantine Empire was a continuation of the Eastern Roman Empire and lasted from 330 to 1450 CE. Here's a little background info on this civilization.
The Byzantine Empire began in 330 CE. That's when Constantine, the first Christian emperor, moved the capital of the Roman Empire to a new city called Constantinople, which he founded on the site of the ancient Greek city, Byzantium. When the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410 and the empire's western provinces were conquered by barbarians, Constantine's eastern capital remained the seat of the Roman emperors. There, generations of emperors ruled for the next 11 centuries. Sharing continuity with the classical Roman Empire gave the Byzantine Empire a technological and artistic advantage over its neighbors, whom Byzantines considered barbarians.
The empire was well organized, with their laws being a combination of old Roman laws and new laws created by Emperor Justinian I, called the Code of Justinian. Their government also had a province system, with each region having their own general and army of peasants, who traded military service for land. These armies protected against Islamic invasions and barbarians. A major impact of the Byzantine Empire was the Great Schism of 1054, which split Roman Catholicism from the Eastern Orthodox Church. This religious impact spread across the world and hurt the power of the Church and the Pope. Lastly, Byzantium was known for connecting the Mediterranean trade to the Silk Road trade, which made them very rich. The Byzantine Empire greatly affected the world and was the main reason why Roman culture was able to be preserved. Before I start talking about the Swahili Coast city-states, here's some background on the Indian Ocean trade networks.
But then Indian Ocean trade surged again in the 14th and 15th centuries. So who was trading? Swahili coast cities, Islamic empires in the Middle East, India, China, Southeast Asia, and not Europe, which is probably one of the other reasons that the monsoon marketplace isn't as famous as it should be. Let's go to the thought bubble. So if you live in China and you need some ivory to make the handle for a sword, you have to trade for it because elephants only live in India and Africa. One of the reasons that Indian Ocean trade took off is that there were a wide range of resources available and a wide range of import needs, from ivory to timber to books to grain. But the most important thing was the wind. The Indian Ocean is home to a set of very special winds called monsoons. You generally hear about monsoons in the context of rain in India, but rather than thinking of monsoons as the rain itself, think of them as the wind that brings a rainy season. The great thing about seasons is that they come regularly, and so do the monsoon winds. So if you were a sailor, you could count on the wind to bring you from Africa to India if you sailed between April and September, and one that would bring you back to Africa if you sailed between November and February.
The Swahili Coast city-states were independent communities on the east coast of Africa that thrived because of their trade on the Indian Ocean and their use of the monsoon winds. The Swahili language is a mix of Arabic and Bantu that resulted from interactions between the two, and is a good example of cultural diversity. Also, traders and merchants were tolerant of other races and religions since it was good for business, leading to diverse, cosmopolitan cities. These African cities connected to Southeast Asia, China, and India, and these cultures all interacted and changed each other. These trade cities thrived during this time and were able to use their environment and resources to their advantage, making their impact one of great importance. The Tang and Song dynasties lasted from 618 to 906 CE and 960 to 1279 CE, respectively, and were times of prosperity in China. The Chinese government thrived due to meritocracy and to civil service exams. Instead of government officials being appointed because of their families, the ones who succeeded on their exams would lead the nation. Under this more organized and smart government, China established a tributary system, where they conquered smaller communities and civilizations that required them to pay heavy taxes. This earned them money and projected their power. Also, this government developed the equal field system so that land would be evenly distributed to peasants. Many positive reforms came from this period of Chinese history, and is why these dynasties are known as the Golden Ages. Thanks for listening.